Biodiversity. Biodiversity is the variety of animals and plants found on this planet, including the geographic locations they are found in. The diversity of species is not evenly distributed throughout the planet because life depends on many factors, including geography. For example, tropical regions support more life than polar regions. Plants, animals, and climate work together to maintain the balance of nature. They act as nuts, bolts, and oil of a perfectly tuned machine. The pyramid of nature's balance. Biodiversity is important for sustaining life on Earth because it prevents any one species from throwing the balance of nature out of order. Snakes are not a welcome presence in our lives, so we fear them and try to get rid of them. One of the many things that snakes feed on is rats. If we were to kill all the snakes, we would end up having a terrible rat problem. Biodiversity means maintaining the balance of nature so that no one thing can become too powerful and therefore bad for everyone else.
The air you breathe, the water you drink, and the food you eat all rely on biological diversity. Good morning, everyone. In this moment, we will all learn about the value of biological diversity. Do you believe that every organism is important? What is biological diversity? Is it something important? How? Well, biological diversity is the key and the primary factor in maintaining the nature's balance here on Earth. Now, biological diversity is contracted into what we commonly utter as biodiversity, which includes the variety of life here on Earth. Biodiversity also means the variability among living organisms from all sources, including inter alia, terrestrial, marine, and aquatic ecosystems. It also involves the complexity of the relationships among living things, between living things, and their environment. You may say that it's pretty broad. Yes, because it really is. Biodiversity is the most complex feature of our planet and is the most vital. The types of biodiversity. First is the genetic diversity, which is the differences in DNA among individuals of one species. Example is among the frogs. The second is the species diversity, the variety of species in a given area, which is among the frogs, the grasses, the trees, and other animals in the area. The last one is the ecosystem diversity, the variety of habitats, ecosystems, and communities where life interplays with the physical environment. Example of these are the tundra, desert, savanna, coral reefs, and forests. So in these three types, the genetic diversity is the simplest and the ecosystem diversity is the most complex. Now, how does biodiversity actually works? Well, species depend and interact on each other. Example is the concept of food chain and food web. The seeds are eaten by rats, snakes feed on that rat. The snake is eaten by an eagle, so on and so forth, which is predation. There is a prey and there is a predator. Also, it could include competition among species, which is natural selection. Next is the symbiosis, which includes commensalism, mutualism, parasitism. Third one is the pollination. So best example of pollinators are the bees, which are considered as crucial agricultural workers. Did you know that Bees pollinate 80% of the world's plants, including 90 different food crops. So 1 out of every 3 or 4 bites of food you eat is thanks to bees. Last concept is the decomposition. So it returns the energy and nutrient into the soil. So it offers food for other organisms, and even humans can benefit from that nutrients or energy transfer. Now, other than species depend and interact with each other, ecosystems also relate to each others. Savanna, oceans, deserts, tundra, marshes, wetlands, and more are all parts of biomes, which are climatic systems of life and organisms. As you have learned and heard, all ecosystems have countless interactions, and these myriad interactions and relationships have made the Earth a habitable planet after all. Let us proceed to the cream of the crop of the lesson, the value of biological diversity. Biodiversity and its components provide a number of goods and services that sustain our lives, livelihoods, and the environment we live in. Healthy biodiversity benefits everyone. We have biological resources, so under it, we have food. With wild varieties of domesticated animals and crops, we are able to eat a variety of vegetables, fruits, and meat. We have water and drinks. So rich biodiversity offers us fresh water and variety of plants and fruits where the fruit extracts are made into juices and certain beverages like beer and wine. We have medicinal resources. Many new medicine are harvested in nature like a species of fungi that fights cancer or the willow bark from a willow tree that acts as pain reliever as an alternative to aspirin. We have wood products. Variety of trees provides a variety of lumber qualities for housing and scaffolding and construction. We have breeding stocks. So wild and domestically raised animals such as pigs, birds, cow, chicken, fishes are readily available. The last one is the diversity in genes. Now researchers find out that genetic diversity helps in preventing the chance of extinction because we can actually clone a specific species for them to multiply. After biological resources, we have ecosystem services. Ecosystems help in regulating climate through carbon and water recycling. Next, nutrient storage and recycling. Nutrients are stored and transferred from one organism to the other, from a specific ecosystem reaching the other ecosystems. Next, soil protection offered by trees and formation and fertilization from decay by the help of microorganisms and earthworms. Next, protection of water resources, pollution breakdown and absorption. Here, the hardwood trees are the most effective in removing and absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Remember that the more trees present in an area, the lesser the pollution takes effect. Next is natural maintenance of ecosystems, and lastly, the protection and recovery of certain natural events. A healthy ecosystem can better withstand and recover from disastrous events. Example is the coral reefs and mangrove swamps that provide invaluable protection from cyclones and tsunamis for those living on the coastal areas. Another general and significant value of biodiversity is that it acts like an invisible hand that boosts our economy. It is said that about 40% of world trade is based on biological products and processes. If we put an economic value of biodiversity, or if money is a measure, the services provided by ecosystems are estimated to be worth trillions of dollars. That's double the world's GDP. Therefore, the cost of replacing these things provided by biodiversity would be extremely expensive if possible. Can you imagine how kind our nature and the biodiversity is to us? The resources, the services, and the benefits are all given to us for free. Therefore, we can say greater variety of species ensures natural sustainability. But the greatest problem is the availability of such goods and services, and therefore the persistence of both industry and life in general is under increasing threats. From the United Nations Third Global Biodiversity Outlook, the rate of biodiversity loss has not been reduced because the five principal pressures of biodiversity are persistent. These pressures include habitat loss and degradation, which is due to deforestation and urbanization. Second, climate change, because of continuous emission of pollutants and waste materials everywhere. Third, overexploitation and unsustainable use, such as the overfishing or unending use of resources even before they can be renewed naturally. Fourth, the excessive nutrient load in other forms such as algal blooms. And lastly, invasive alien species, where the alien species take over the native inhabitants of an area rapidly, such as the blue lionfish. Despite knowing the value and importance of biodiversity, still, human activities have been causing massive extinctions. 75% genetic diversity of agricultural crops have been lost. 75% of world's fisheries are fully or overexploited, and around 70% of the world's known species risk of extinction. Billions of populations of wildlife have been lost over the planet, which represents a frightening assault on the foundations of human civilization. Let me remind you, all of the benefits that we get from the rich biodiversity would be extremely expensive if we are to pay, and we can see how the loss of biodiversity affects us heavily. Therefore, it makes sense and is logical for economic and development to move towards sustainability. I provide you with examples of initiatives that reminds us how kind nature of biodiversity and nature itself would be if they are protected. First, implementation of reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. It cost them about 17.2 to 33 billion US dollars, but the benefit is worth 3.2 trillion US dollars. Second is mangrove planting in India. The cost is just over $1 million, but the benefit saved annual expenditures on dike maintenance worth $7 million. There are plenty of things we can do to save biodiversity, but indeed, sustaining biodiversity is one of the greatest challenges of the modern era. The major concern is that many species are being lost before we are even aware of them or the role they play in the circle of life. So, I ask everyone to dare to care, for without biodiversity, there's no future for humanity.
Good day, everyone. It's me again, Irene S. Travis. Before we start, I want you to go out and observe your environment. What do you see? Is it clean or is it the other way? Now, go to your kitchen. What do you see? Do you have separate trash bins for your trashes? Okay. Today, we are going to explore about waste management. But first, let's discuss the definition of a waste. Wastes are unwanted or unusable materials. It is any substance which is discarded after primary use or is worthless, defective, and of no use. It is something that is thrown away because it is no longer useful, and it is often called trash, garbage, rubbish, or junk. We have 5 types of waste. These are organic, hazardous, solid, liquid, and recyclable. First, let's discuss on liquid waste. So it refers to all grease, oil, sludges, wash water, waste detergents, and dirty water that have been thrown away. They are hazardous and poisonous to our environment and are found in industries as well as households. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, liquid waste is defined as any waste material that passes the definition of a liquid state. Second, we have organic waste. It refers to rotten meat, garden, and food waste. This type of rubbish is commonly found in homes. With time, they decompose and turn into manure by the action of microorganisms on them. Organic waste is any material that is biodegradable and comes from either a plant or animal. This waste can be broken down into carbon dioxide, methane, or simple organic molecules. Third, we have solid waste. It is any garbage, sludge, and refuse found in industrial and commercial locations. So this includes glass and ceramics, plastic waste, paper rubbish, and metals and tins. So glass and ceramics. Numerous companies readily recycle ceramics and glass. The catch here is that you have to dispose of them properly. The next, plastic waste is any container, jar, bottle, and bag that is found in companies and houses. Plastics are non-biodegradable and most of them cannot be recycled. Next, paper rubbish. This refers to all newspapers, packaging materials, cardboards, and other paper products. Paper is recyclable, and we know that. And lastly is metals and tins. You can easily find tins and metals in homes because food containers and household materials are made from them. So solid waste is generated from industrial, residential, and commercial activities in a given area. These are any discarded or abandoned materials, and these can be solid, liquid, semi-solid, or containerized gaseous material. Fourth, we have recyclable waste. Recyclable materials include many kinds of glass, paper, cardboard, metal, plastic, tires, textiles, and etc. Recycling is a process of converting waste materials into new materials and objects. And we must remember that not all items are recyclable. We have to be careful when putting things into the recycle bin. And lastly is the hazardous waste, which includes flammable, corrosive, toxic, and reactive materials. In a nutshell, they are wastes that pose a significant or potential threat to our environment. Hazardous waste is a waste that has substantial or potential threats to public health or the environment. Now let's move on to how waste impacts the environment. So the trash that is dumped in landfills releases methane gas. Open landfills were found to represent 91% of all landfill methane emissions. The burning of large, open piles of trash in various parts of the world emits dangerous levels of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas that is heating up our planet. Waste has impact on wildlife. The food waste found by animals may end up poisoning them, and the wastes that are also dumped into the ocean tends to have toxic substances that may cause death or worse, extinction. Not only are landfills changing animal habitats, they are also destroying their natural habitats. Waste has also an impact on public safety. The more emissions that we produce due to how much trash we generate affects us long term. One can develop diseases such as asthma, birth defects, cancer, cardiovascular disease, childhood cancer, COPD, infectious diseases, low birth weight and preterm delivery, and bacteria, vermin, and insects can also be added to the problem that trash causes.
Waste has also an impact in climate change. When organic waste decomposes, carbon dioxide and methane gas is created. Methane is created when there is no air present, while carbon dioxide is the natural product when anything roots in air. Both carbon dioxide and methane are greenhouse gases, which contribute to global warming and climate change. The trash that is dumped in landfills releases methane gas. Open landfills were found to represent 91% of all landfill methane emissions. The burning of large open piles of trash in various parts of the world emits dangerous levels of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas that is heating up our planet.
Now, you already know about the different types of waste and its impacts to the environment. I am going to discuss about the waste disposal or the methods of waste disposal. But first, let us understand first what is waste disposal or otherwise known as waste management. Waste management or waste disposal includes the activities and actions required to manage waste from its inception to its final disposal. This includes the collection, transport, treatment, and disposal of waste, together with monitoring and regulation of the waste management process. Waste can be solid, liquid, or gas, and each type has different methods of disposal. Waste management deals with all types of waste, including industrial, biological, and household. As you can see on the picture, from left to right, you'll understand how waste management takes place in a general sense. From disposing of waste, industrial or domestic, to the collection of waste that varies on different areas or place, then after collecting the waste, it is being transported either directly into the landfill or to the waste treatment areas. Now, let's find out what are the methods of waste disposal. As we all know that garbage accumulation has never been of a concern in the past, but due to globalization and industrialization, there is a need for a more efficient waste disposal method. Following are the methods that are used today. There are 6 methods of waste disposal. First is the landfill. In this process, the waste that cannot be reused or recycled are separated out and spread as a thin layer in low-lying areas across a city. A layer of soil is added after each layer of garbage. However, once this process is complete, the area is declared unfit for construction of buildings for the next 20 years. Second is incineration. It is a process of controlled combustion of garbage to reduce it to incombustible matter such as ash and waste gas. This process reduces the volume of waste by 90% and is considered as one of the most hygienic methods of waste disposal. In some cases, the heat generated is used to produce electricity. However, some consider this process not quite environmentally friendly due to the generation of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. Third is the waste compaction. The waste materials such as cans and plastic bottles are compacted into blocks and sent for recycling. This process prevents the oxidation of metals and reduces airspace need, thus making transportation and positioning easy. Fourth is the biogas generation of biodegradable waste. such as food items, animal waste, or organic industrial waste from food packaging industries are sent to biodegradation plants. In biodegradation plants, they are converted to biogas by degradation with the help of bacteria, fungi, or other microbes. Here, the organic matter serves as food for the microorganisms. The degradation can happen aerobically with oxygen or anaerobically without oxygen. Biogas is generated as a result of this process, which is used as fuel and as the residue is used as manure. Fifth is composting. Composting all organic materials decompose with time. Food scraps, yard waste, and etc. make up for one of the major organic waste we throw every day. The process of composting starts with this organic waste being buried under layers of soil and then are left to decay under the action of microorganisms such as bacteria and fungi. This results in the formation of nutrient-rich manure. Also, this process ensures that the nutrients are replenished in the soil. Besides enriching the soil, composting also increases the water retention capacity. In agriculture, it is the best alternative to chemical fertilization. Sixth is vermicomposting. It is the process of using worms for the degradation of organic matter into nutrient-rich manure. Worms consume and digest the organic matter. The byproducts of digestion, which are excreted out by the worms, make the soil nutrient-rich, thus enhancing the growth of bacteria and fungi. It is also far more effective than traditional composting. Read the quote of Scott Edmund Miller. It reads as, "The excellence and efficiency of any nation or of our global community at large is driven by the collective empowerment of individuals. Gross consumer waste, haphazard bureaucratic spending, and the careless consumption of natural resources are all reflection of the mismanagement of personal power common within the average citizen." This quotation reflects to every individual in the sense of waste management awareness and the application of the 3 R's of environment. So what is this 3 R's of the environment? I think it's safe to say that we've all heard about the 3 R's of waste management. The 3 R's stands for reduce, recycle, and reuse. It is important for each of us to do our part in conserving our environment. One way to put that plan into action is through the 3 R's of waste management. First is learn to reduce. Reducing is simply creating less waste. By reducing, you stop the problem at the source. Making less waste to begin with means there's less waste to clean up. Second is learn to recycle. Recycling is the most common use of the 3 R's. Recycling is changing discarded materials into new products in order to avoid using more virgin resources. Third is learn to reuse. Reusing is taking old or unwanted items you might otherwise throw away and finding new use of them. So that's all about waste management. Always remember, waste isn't waste until you waste it. Thank you.
Have you ever wondered what are the environmental impacts of fossil fuels? So for today, we will tackle about this topic and I hope you will learn something from this discussion. What is fossil fuels? It is a rock-like gas or liquid resources that are burned to generate power. It is used as an energy source in the electricity and transportation sectors, and it is a leading source of the world's global warming pollution. As we all know, fossil fuels is a non-renewable source. For example, are coal, oil, and natural gas. It supplies about 80% of the world's energy. And to add about fossil fuels has a high carbon content. Fossil fuels gives impact to our environment by extracting, transporting, and burning of fossil fuels. Key methods in extracting fossil fuels: mining and drilling. Mining is used to extract solid fossil fuels such as coal by digging, scrapping, or otherwise exposing buried resources, while drilling it helps extract liquid of gaseous fossil fuels that can be forced to flow to the surface, such as unconventional oil and natural gas. In extracting fossil fuels, it affects the water, land, and contribute to the global warming emissions. So in the water impact, it happens when oil and gas is extracted and the water that has been trapped in geologic formation and brought to the surface carries a naturally occurring dissolved gases, dissolved solids, heavy metals, hydrocarbons, and radioactive materials that makes unsuitable to humans' consumption, and it is difficult to dispose. In land use, it uses large amount of land that distributed by the drilling wells, access roads, processing facilities, and pipelines that associated with oil and gas drilling operations. In particular, noise and habitat fragmentation can harm wildlife populations. In global warming emissions, the natural gas climate emissions are not only generated when it is burned as a fuel at power plants or in our homes, because the full global warming impact of natural gas includes the methane emissions from the drilling wells and the pipeline transportation upon transporting the natural gas in our homes and to our businesses. Transporting oil can cause oil spill. It happens when transported across the ocean with the use of super tankers, and it is moved over land by pipeline, rail, and truck. So in every case, there is a risk of oil spills, and that oil spills brings a serious environmental threat, and if it continues, it can lead to a major risk to our environment. Transporting coal can cause coal rail emergencies. It is because while transporting coal, it can produce coal dust, which presents serious cardiovascular and respiratory risks for community near the transportation routes of the delivery. Transporting natural gas can bring hazards. As we all know, natural gas is a highly flammable substance, and it is transported over long distances by transmission pipelines, while the distribution pipelines deliver gas locally to our homes and businesses. And there are so many process and safety precautionary measures that should be followed in transporting natural gas to avoid accidents and to prevent the danger that can bring to the people, especially to the environment.
Now, let's talk about what would be the impact of burning fossil fuels to the air. Fossil fuels produce large quantities of carbon dioxide when burned. Carbon emission trap heat in the atmosphere and lead to the air pollution as well as to the climate change. In the United States, the burning of fossil fuels, particularly for the power and transportation sectors, accounts for about three-quarters of our carbon emissions. Burning fossil fuels emits a number of air pollutants that are harmful to both the environment and public health. It also releases nitrogen oxide into the atmosphere, which contribute to the formation of smog and acid rain. All fossil fuels contain large amounts of carbon. If you followed the energy and climate change debate at any level, you have likely heard the term carbon footprint used to describe the relative amount of fossil fuels being used by a given sector, piece of equipment, or community. Fossil fuels also contains substantial amounts of the elements such as hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur. All of these elements are highly reactive both with each other and with different elements in the air and on the ground. Burning of fossil fuels releases harmful substances into the atmosphere such as carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, volatile organic compound, carbon monoxide, lead, and mercury. Around the world, 9 out of 10 people breathe unhealthy air. Air pollution is now the biggest environmental risk for early death, responsible for as many as 5 million premature deaths each year from heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, and respiratory diseases. Burning fossil fuels is the major source of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that contribute to global climate change. Many of these pollutants irritate and damage lungs, can lead to cancer, emphysema, and asthma. Sulfur dioxide is one of the major chemicals that release from burning fossil fuels that can cause acid rain. Mercury and lead can cause neurological and developmental damage in the children. Sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide released into the air by fossil fuel power plants, vehicles, and all refineries are the biggest cause of acid rain. Sulfur dioxide, primary result of burning coal, contribute to acid rain and the formation of harmful particulate matter. It can exacerbate respiratory ailments including asthma, nasal congestion, and pulmonary inflammation. Nitrogen dioxide's byproduct of all fossil fuel combustion contribute to acid rain and ground level ozone which can burn lung tissues and can make people more susceptible to asthma, bronchitis, and other chronic respiratory diseases. This image illustrates how acid rain forms. First, emission of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide are released into the air or atmosphere. Second, the pollutants are transformed into acid particles that may be transported long distance. Third, these acid particles fall to the earth as wet and dry disposition as dust, rain, snow, etc., and last, may cause harmful effects on soil, forest, streams, and lakes. Acid rain or acid disposition is a broad term that includes any form of precipitation with acidic components such as sulfuric or nitric acid that fall to the ground from the atmosphere in wet or dry forms. This can include rain, snow, fog, hail, or even dust that is acidic. Acid rain is formed when sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide mix with water, oxygen, and other chemicals in the atmosphere, leading to rain and other precipitation that is mildly acidic. Acidic precipitation increases the acidity of lakes and streams, which can be harmful to the fish and the other aquatic organisms. It can also damage trees and weaken forest ecosystem.
Good day, everyone. Before I'll start the discussion, let me first introduce myself. I'm Marichel M. Hito, and today I will be discussing alternative energy resources and their potential to replace fossil fuels. In the energy sector, fossil fuel sources have been the main energy source due to their relatively low price. However, our energy demand is predicted to rise in the future, and we can no longer rely on infinite and polluting energy sources. In the last decade, we have seen a positive shift towards expanding our renewable energy capacity, both on a local and global level. But before we start the main topic, let me discuss first the difference between renewable energy and non-renewable energy. Now, what is renewable energy? Renewable energy, often referred to as clean energy, comes from the natural sources or processes that are constantly replenished. For example, sunlight or wind keeps shining and blowing even if their availability depends on time and weather. Wind has powered boats to sail the seas and windmills to grind grain. The sun has provided warmth during the day and helped kindle fires to last into the evening. But over the past 500 years or so, humans increasingly turned to cheaper, dirtier energy sources such as coal and fracked gas. Now that we have increasingly innovative and less expensive ways to capture and retain wind and solar energy, renewables are becoming a more important power source. Even rural communities rely on renewable energy for heating and lighting. What is non-renewable energy? Non-renewable or dirty energy includes fossil fuels such as oil, gas, and coal. Non-renewable sources of energy are only available in limited amounts and take a long time to replenish. When we pump gas at the station, we're using a finite resource refined from crude oil that's been around since prehistoric times. Many non-renewable energy sources can endanger the environment or human health. For example, oil drilling might require strip mining Canada's boreal forest. The technology associated with fracking can cause earthquakes and water pollution, and coal power plants foul the air. To top it off, all these activities contribute to global warming. The potential issues surrounding the use of fossil fuels, particularly in terms of climate change, were considered earlier than you may think. Here, we examine 10 of the most prominent alternative fuel sources and look at the benefits they offer and potential for increased uptake in the coming years. The first one is the solar power. When most people think of alternative energy sources, they tend to use solar power as an example. The technology has evolved massively over the years and is now used for large-scale energy production and power generations for single homes. A number of countries have introduced initiatives to promote the growth of solar power. This energy source is completely renewable and the cost of installation are outweighed by the money saved in energy bills from traditional suppliers. Nevertheless, solar cells are prone to deterioration over large periods of time and are not as effective in uniform weather conditions. Next is nuclear power. Nuclear power is among the most abundant forms of alternative energy. It creates a number of direct benefits in terms of emissions and efficiency, while also boosting the economy by creating jobs in plant creation and operation. 13 countries relied on nuclear power to produce at least a quarter of their electricity as of 2015, and there are currently 450 plants in operation throughout the world. The drawback is that when something goes wrong with a nuclear power plant, the potential for catastrophe exists. The third one is hydroelectric energy. Hydroelectric methods actually are some of the earliest means of creating energy, though their use began to decline with the rise of fossil fuels. Despite this, they still account for approximately 7% of the energy produced in the United States. Hydroelectric energy carries with it a number of benefits. Not only a clean source of energy, which means it doesn't create pollution and the myriad issues that arise from it, but it is also a renewable energy source. Better yet, it also offers a number of secondary benefits that are not immediately apparent. The dams used in generating hydroelectric power also contribute to flood control and irrigation techniques. Next is biomass energy. Biomass energy comes in a number of forms. Burning wood has been used for thousands of years to create heat, but more recent advancements have also seen waste, such as that in landfills and alcohol products used for similar purposes. Focusing on burning wood, the heat generated can be equivalent to that of a central heating system. Furthermore, the costs involved tend to be lower and the amount of carbon released by this kind of fuel falls below the amount released by fossil fuels. However, there are a number of issues that you need to consider with these systems, especially if installed in the home. Maintenance can be a factor, plus you may need to acquire permissions from a local authority to install one. Next is natural gas. Natural gas sources have been in use for a number of decades, but it is through the progression of compression techniques that it is becoming a more viable alternative energy source. In particular, it is being used in cars to reduce carbon emissions. Demand for this energy source has been increasing. Despite this, natural gas does come with some issues. The potential for contamination is larger than with other alternative fuel sources, and natural gas still emits greenhouse gases, even if the amount is lower than with fossil fuels. Next is geothermal power. At its most basic, geothermal power is about extracting energy from the ground around us. It is growing increasingly popular, with the sector as a whole experiencing 5% growth in 2015. The World Bank currently estimates that around 40 countries could meet most of their power demands using geothermal power. This power source has massive potential while doing little to disrupt the land. However, the heavy upfront cost of creating geothermal power plants has led to slower adoption than may have been expected for a fuel source with so much promise. Seventh is wind energy. This form of energy generation has become increasingly popular in recent years. It offers much the same benefits that many other alternative fuel sources do in that it makes use of renewable sources and generates no waste. Current wind energy installations power roughly 20 million homes in the United States per year, and that number is growing. Most states in the nation now have some form of wind energy setup, and investment into the technology continues to grow. Unfortunately, this form of energy generation also presents challenges. Wind turbines restrict views and may be dangerous to some forms of wildlife. Next is biofuels. In contrast to biomass energy sources, biofuels make use of animal and plant life to create energy. In essence, they are fuels that can be obtained from some form of organic matter. They are renewable in cases where plants are used, as these can be regrown on a yearly basis. However, they do require dedicated machinery for extraction, which can contribute to increased emissions even if biofuels themselves don't. Next is tidal energy. While tidal energy uses the power of water to generate energy, much like with hydroelectric methods, its application actually has more in common with wind turbines in many cases. The most common form of tidal energy generation is the use of tidal stream generators. These use the kinetic energy of the ocean to power turbines, without producing the waste of fossil fuels or being as susceptible to the elements as other forms of alternative energy. And the last one is hydrogen gas. Unlike other forms of natural gas, hydrogen is a completely clean burning fuel. Once produced, hydrogen gas cells emit only water vapor and warm air when in use. The major issue with this form of alternative energy is that it is most derived from the use of natural gas and fossil fuels. As such, it could be argued that the emissions created to extract it counteract the benefits of its use. The process of electrolysis, which is essential for the splitting of water into hydrogen and oxygen, makes this less of an issue. However, electrolysis still ranks below the previously mentioned methods for obtaining hydrogen, though research continues to make it more efficient and cost-effective. Now, from those mentioned alternative energy resources, does it come into your mind that can these alternative energy resources effectively replace fossil fuels? Whether alternative energy sources such as biofuels, hydrogen, solar, and geothermal, or the non-renewable nuclear energy can meet energy demands better than finite fossil fuels such as oil and coal remains hotly debated. Proponents of alternative energy argue that fossil fuels are inefficient, unsustainable, environmentally destructive, and the primary contributor to global climate change. They say renewable energies are a viable and immediately needed alternative to fossil fuel use that could boost the economy and reduce reliance on foreign energy sources. Opponents contend that many technological hurdles have to be overcome before alternative energy can replace even a small portion of the power provided by fossil fuels. They say that fossil fuels will last hundreds of years longer, be made increasingly efficient, remain the most economical choice, and that reliance on efficient alternative energies will hurt the economy. Though it may seem obvious that environmentally friendly alternative energy can replace fossil fuel, we cannot forget that there are many downsides to this as well, such as the amount of money that fossil fuels rake in for the economy, and how that will be lost when we switch to only renewable energy. But Both sides of the argument agree that we must come together to create a more sustainable world for us to live in. There is an equal danger in believing in one side of the story because without one, our world would turn on itself quickly. That is why we cannot choose one or the other, but both. That's all for today's discussion. Thank you for watching and listening.